Name's Jeff Miner. Been braiding for probably too many years. I build saddles. I've done bits and spurs. I'm engraved silver, but rawhide braiding is my passion. It's what I really enjoy doing. Normally, I'm on the other side of the workshop deal. I've put on several. I'm here to learn. I've braided a lot, but I think in the rawhide braiding, you never know it all. I think once you figure that you've got it all down, then you're going downhill. So I'm here to learn. If I can give some people some tips, pointers, I don't think there should be any secrets. But if a guy can help each other out, well, I think it'd be great. Live in Salmon, Idaho, very remote. This is the first time in a couple, 3 years I've even left the county. So this is a little different to be down here with a bunch of people that I would consider peers. So hopefully this will be a great 4 days. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll pick each other's brains. Well, I was going to show you guys how I cut my string. I generally cut rounds. Most of the time I'm doing scalded hides right now. They seem to be faster. They've been turning out really well. So I've been using scalded hides. This one's a scraped hide, I believe. Stick and ashes. Yep. So I haven't worked with a lot of these. They say they're a little bit softer because you're working the hide a little more. I'm not sure because this will be the first time I've cut one of these. So hopefully. What I generally do is I use a draw gauge. This one's not the comfortable one that I have at home, but this one's Brent's, and it'll work. But I generally cut a 3/8 to a 1/2 inch soga string, wide string, and I've got an 8-foot bench, and I've got 2 spikes on each end. And what I'll do is I'll start it. I generally use a round knife. I've got a straight knife today, but I'll start on the outside with a tempered round.
What do you mean?
No, I think that'll be good. What I do, like I said, on my 8-foot bench, I've got 2 spikes that are sticking out on the edge. And say this would be an 8-foot bench, and I've got a spike sticking out here, one on the other side. And I'll take and just start it and put a spike in. We're not going to worry about these tables here.
Take that table up front here.
I'm just going to head out there.
Well, you can head down the road.
Yep. And generally the first time around, if you're not exactly round, you're going to be evening out some of those rounds. But I'll do an 8-foot, on an 8-foot table, I'll go 8 foot, and then I'll take and wrap it around here, and then go back 8 foot. I've tried doing, like if I would just take off and go clear back there, what happens is you get a little stretch in your string, and it gets to be kind of like a rubber band, and then pretty soon it's jumping here in your hand. The closer you have it to something solid, the easier it is to pull that string.
We're pretty efficient bit setters here, you know that.
Yeah.
It's like for me, if I do this with the cutting, and I'm going down the road with I got in my shop all the way through the barn. I got marks on my floor, like 6-foot marks.
Oh.
So if you don't go
How
that
much you want
way,
this cut?
You can cut the whole thing if you want.
I don't think we need to cut the whole
Do you
thing.
want to cut? You can just.
like a 6-foot.
You want to cut it off? Do you want to do the Aussie cutter with the same disc?
No, it's going to be too thick.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
And so, like,
Oh, yeah,
double
I could.
6
Could.
foot will
But-
be
Because the other one's probably.
the measurement for a reins,
Right.
braid reins all the way through. So a 6-foot mark is always good.
And you always got to feed that in. It's pretty easy. If you don't feed it in, if you get a little behind, then that's what happens.
Yeah,
That's
do
when you look
wanna
off.
Tell
Yeah.
them about
When you're watching TV, cutting string, that don't work very good.
tell them about the sharpening on the inside bevel thing.
Yeah, and And that's one thing that a lot of times I take for granted. On these, of course, we didn't have the proper blade for this, but the proper blade for these draw gauges is the bevel is on the inside. It's straight on the outside, the bevel's on the inside. That way it's always feeding into your gauge. You can run these, and they're good and sharp, but you have to really watch because the bevel is on both, and it's just basically cutting wherever you're guiding it. It's not really feeding into it. So that's one of those things that...
Something I do on those, I use those quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
And I've got a grinder that's got a belt wheel on it, and I bevel the inside. Just touch it up.
Right.
And that's enough to send it out.
To send it, yeah.
Or if you just leave it straight out of the box,
Right.
absolutely right. And I take it wherever you use it. I take it, the first thing I do is I break the tops off, points off of it. And I take it to that wheel, and that wheel on my inside.
Right.
It just draws it in there.
And another thing, I mean, thanks for pointing out the safety issue. These are notorious for taking your finger off inside here if you got the blade sticking down, which if you're frugal like me, I try to use every possible inch of that blade that's sharp. And then pretty soon you've got this thing sticking down further here than it is up here. And it's really easy to catch your finger.
I usually break them in half, so I just don't
Right.
stick it down there.
The other
Probably
thing I
goes
do
a quarter
is-
of an inch that way.
I put a little piece of square leather where you adjust it, where you tighten it up,
Yep.
to take the play out of that.
Right.
If they're old Osborne, you know,
Uh-huh.
they're gonna show some wear.
Right. Then what I do after I've cut my soga string, my wide string, I'll take and most of the time it's been stretched, not completely. I don't stretch it and dry it, but I've stretched it, you know, running it back and forth on the table. There's still going to be some curve to it. Then I'll run it through the splitter and get it basically all the same thickness. I think that's essential to have it all the same. I don't know how sharp this splitter is, but we're going to see how far we can go here.
Brand sharp.
Not real sharp, not good enough sharp.
Not sharp right there.
I got my splitter mounted on a 2x6, slides in and out of a slot in my bench. And I've got a hole down there where his hand is, and it's about a 3-inch slot, and I feed it up through there. And I'm pulling, and I don't have to worry that much about it coming out and splitting my thong in two. And I can still move it side to side and find the place in the blade that still has not been used or pretty sharp.
Is there a sharp place on this blade?
He brought that thing to use that in the demonstration.
Over
Sharp.
here. There
All
you
right
go.
on that.
Yeah. We'll get this here.
Not anymore.
There, it's better. One of the things I've found, learned through experience too, is when you're working with rawhide, these long strings, I used to always have a tendency to throw them on the floor like this.
Step on it.
And when you step on them, it kinks them. And then when you don't look at all of that, every inch of it, then when you run it back through a splitter like this, that kink comes up and it'll cut it. I've done that I don't know how many times on really nice range strings that are 12 foot long, and I cut 4 foot off of them.
That's what's gonna make them out string.
But I try to get that pulled down to where it's all the same thickness. And sometimes it'll take a couple of times through. Gonna have to go just a touch more. By the time you run it through a couple, 3 times, I think you've got pretty much most of the stretch out. That'll be perfect there.
Oh, almost hit you.
smoke in here in a bit. And then I think, well, Len showed how the Australian stranders work on that, but I basically do the same thing then on my bench. And these I've adjusted. This one I've modified a little bit for really thin.
Yeah, it's like you wanted before. When you're backing up like that, you don't want a dog laying there.
No. Dogs and cats really shouldn't be in the shop. I'm gonna get your ride. I'm not used to having that black thing on here.
Jeff, when you run that strainer there, do you put it on the, or within the inside of your circle or the outside?
On the outside. Yep. This was the end that the split was on, and I always start from that end because it's always running on the outside of it. If you do it on the inside, then you're going to end up cutting off. These stranders don't cut an inside circle very well.
That hide, you didn't soak it or do anything. All you did was de-hair it and
This has been ash scraped,
ash, and that's it. It just,
but it's tempered. Yeah, and that's all it was.
okay, but you tempered it.
This is tempered. That's the right feel right there that you want to have in a hide.
What did you do to temper it? Did
Soak
you
it,
just
soak it a little
last
bit,
night
and then let it dry. Yeah.
We
Now
throw
there's
we throw it in the dugout last night before we went to dinner. And about an hour in there, we took it back out. Then we throw it in the grass for about a couple, 3 hours. Let that water just soak into it. Then we put it in a plastic bag until this morning.
this hide here was flint dry this morning. Okay, Brent put it in hot water for
About 45 minutes.
45 minutes to an hour. Took it out, put it in a bag, and that's what it feels like. But it was flint hard.
Now that,
Warm water will bring it back quicker. You could put it in cold and it'd be half a day.
right.
You guys gonna have a real close look at this rawhide here. They call it, it's an ash scraped. And you will notice something on here, it has scratches on it. So if you do ash scraping, make sure you don't have any sand or any hard stuff in there. So let
That
it,
screen
you know, kind of get rid of sand or anything, and otherwise it will ruin your rawhide.
Now, as I think Len mentioned, this does take a little practice in order to get it good. But really, it doesn't take as much as you might think. I mean, it takes a steady hand, but
And a wide knife. Wide knife versus a narrow knife.
well, Tim George uses an X-Acto knife. This is the knife I use. Pablo Lozano taught me how to do it, and it wasn't. There are some people that are right, and some people are left-handed, and some are ambidextrous in able to do this. He was able to do it both ways, with both hands. Armando De Ferrari down there, he would do it one way, and then he'd turn the string around and do it, you know, with his right hand. He was more steady with that. This is,
Pablo's kind of superhuman anyways.
yeah, this is probably not the method I would use if I'm doing horse gear, something that bigger strings, thicker strings than that. This method is mainly for horse hide or maybe really fine calf hides and that. You have more of a chance of cutting the string in half quickly unless you're really good at it.
Well, you're actually slicing as opposed to scraping, aren't you?
Just a normal string cutter.
I need to put a little notch in here.
Cutter, Pat?
I put a piece of rawhide. Softened rawhide works the best. Leather works good, piece of skirting leather.
BBC coupling works too with tape right now.
The one that I use all the time is now in luggage. It's supposed to be here sometime today, and I'll show you that one tomorrow. Softened rawhide works a lot better because this is a little bit hard right now. That string is a little uneven right there at the start.
That's Brent's string. Now, if I would make a riata, I bevel the top side of the riata on the beveler, the normal beveler in a 45 degree or 50, and I bevel the lower side on half. Because I want the low, if that is the string and it's beveled up here and underneath the flesh side, I bevel real in a, I don't know what you call it.
Longer bevel.
Flat.
Have a longer bevel.
Yeah, and you don't have any beveler for that. So I do this that way to have this 4 strands or 6 strands really laying nice, smooth in there, and they're very, very strong. So I'll have like 3/4 of the bevel on the flesh side and 1/4 of the bevel on the hair side. That'll make a good, stout, tough riata. But
How much did you say you take off the flesh side? How heavy do you
on
go?
the flesh side, I mean, like,
Hey, drop, take it.
let's say like 3/4 of the,
So about a 60-degree angle probably.
Hey,
Probably a 60-degree angle.
yeah, just like more like this one, the top side, I'll go like in a 45. And this one here, I'll have more torch, like I only have the center piece
Yeah.
still there.
It's hard, it'll be hard.
I only do this with the knife on the lower side of the riata string. Okay, it's nice, huh? And then he got in the jail in the gaucho section. That's where he met Pablo.
Then, like kind of like what Albert said there, you can use a different bevel. I mean, most of the time I think it's a 45 on top that you're using for rawhide, but on the bottom, if you wanted to do a shallower bevel or whatever, you can just adjusting your knife is all you have to do. You wouldn't have to have a special tool or anything. Like I said, I prefer doing this on the lighter strings, the horse rawhide, kangaroo rawhide, calf. It's a little easier. This is fairly crude, considering what I would do in my shop. But hopefully I'll have all my stuff here and I can show you how to do some horsehide tomorrow. And then if you wanted to take a little bit off the backside, you could do the same thing with just a real shallow, you could just have it quite a bit shallower, taken off the backside instead of the 45.
Do you bevel your butt string both sides or just?
Rawhide, I just basically bevel the top side on everything. I haven't had a need yet. I'm not quite into the extent that Albert's into as far as the hackamores and that. I do quite a bit more of, a little more diversity of braided goods. Albert, on some of the heavier strings on his frames, he's beveling the backside. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great. It's another process, and I think it would turn out a better product in the end. Anytime you can refine something, I think you're way better off. I mean, it's, as we've been looking at all these string cutters and that, Luis Ortega's was fairly basic, crude. It can be done with a knife, an awl, and a piece of leather. But it's a whole lot easier if you've got the equipment you know. But there again, most rawhiders I don't think are very affluent and don't have a readily cash flow, so sometimes that limits what you can do with it. But being able to learn all the different ways, I mean, even if you got the fanciest string cutter and beveler and that, it's always good to try something like this. This is a piece of whatever that plastic, high density plastic is. You can buy these basically already set up other than cutting the slot in them at Home Depot. I mean, there's
Oh, nylon space force.
right. There's nothing to them. In the experience I've had, I would suggest that you get a knife for each one of these, because once you set it in this, it's hard to get a different width. I've tried, and man, I tell you what, you know, you'll get one just perfect. You think just a little bit narrower, and you try to adjust that narrower, and it's already got a set with that knife in there.
You need a half dozen of those.
Right. Have them, and then whatever that width, cut several strings, whatever
Those
that width
washers are
is.
so expensive, it's gonna really break.
Yeah.
7 cents a piece.
The only thing that I see with this newfangled nylon that will wear, bone or horn, I mean, it takes a lot to wear them out, and that's I think why they use
those different size circles over here on or something.
yeah, they use them on cow horns, the tips, and they'll cut them, and then you know they're about that big, and then they have a hole in them. A lot of them I seen when I was in Argentina were made out of a hardwood, you know, like a mahogany or a walnut or something, and some of those were just square, and they had a slot cut in them, and then they just set the knife, and then they'd have them set up on their bench, and they had 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 1.2 millimeter. They never changed them. If they needed a 0.5 millimeter string, they went and got that cutter, and they cut them. These will wear, because after you cut, you know, several strings, that plastic just naturally wears. With the rawhide, it's pretty abrasive.
You just cut that stuff. With that,
The hacksaw.
Jeff, with that knife in there, are you making any kind of groove on the back side of that inside circle?
I don't, because that plastic is soft enough.
Soft enough?
On horn, you probably would have to, or it comes loose real easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But tomorrow I
Sure
will.
lock it in, wouldn't it? If you made a groove and ran your knife in, it would be locked right in.
It would. Yeah. But mostly that locks in. The sharpness of the blade cuts into that nylon, and that's where it's going to be set. If you pull it out of that notch and try to set it over, a lot of times it just goes over and then it just falls right back in the same hole. So you can't really, once you get it set, that's where it's at.
Something you gotta do, just like on the draw gauge knife there, how you sharpen it, you gotta have that knife in there so it's drawing itself into the hide, where it's not being straight, or
Right.
if it's kicked to the outside, just hair, it won't cut. It's gotta be kicked in just a hair.
Would a single bevel knife be good for that job or not?
It would, but you know, where that's a circle, it doesn't take much to just move your. I mean, whatever your bevel. If it's a 20-degree bevel on your knife blade, just move it over at 20 degrees in there, and you're straight.
I use a number 10 scalpel blade is what I use, and it's perfect size and everything, and I cut a slight notch in the back, just a very minute notch. Just slide that up in there, and like it says, don't move it, because once you get it in there,
Right.
it's there. And I always have the back end kicked over just a fraction, that puts the blade into the hide.
These, the knife that's in there is just a basic paring knife that I think I bought for $5 or $6. It's a cheap knife, but you can take it out and you can sharpen it. It is nice to have blades, you know, like a scalpel blade and that, where they're just razor sharp when you use them. One time with those, basically you push them up in there and that's the only part you use. There's not a continuation. With a knife like that one, sometimes you can get a little bit more or just pull it out and sharpen it. And then you've got a new place on there. And if you've got a couple of different widths of knives, you can put them in there, same place, but you'll have a different sharp edge on it. Just trying to think what else.
I think a tapered knife works better. Got a
It
little
does.
bit of weight down to the bottom there. I like to feel it better than just that scalpel.
Right.
These blades are available from Jan's Knife Supply up in Davis, Oklahoma. They have an online catalog, and get a catalog from them. I think they were 25 or 30 bucks for the blade and put your own handle on. They're D2 steels, they'll hold edge really, really well.
You're going to show us the goodies. Here's Enrique's set, and he's got them all marked 1.2 millimeter, 1.4, 1.3. Now his is set up with a straight. It's not a tapered. So as was said, you want to be very careful that these don't move up and down.
Yeah, and you can see that I tapered.
They are tapered?
A little bit, see, on the grinder.
You just take the grinder, take the backside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
just a little bit. So from the, I chop the tips so I don't hurt myself so often. And then I do something like this on the grinder. So now it has to be like a knife, so you can.
Wedge.
So first I just put
Wedge.
that.
Wedge.
The wedge.
Okay.
So I put that in there, but not very deep, and I try until I get the size I
Right.
want. And then when I like it, I put it on the vise and I hammer it. So
So it's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a good way to go. That way they're marked. You know exactly what they are.